The Galactic Concord had cataloged thousands of intelligent species, each assigned a threat index based on predictable metrics: industrial growth, energy output, territorial aggression, and technological ceiling. Humanity scored low, not because they were weak, but because they were inconsistent. Their history showed cooperation followed by chaos, brilliance followed by self-inflicted collapse. The analysts agreed on one thing: humans were not a strategic threat. They were an anomaly best observed, not feared. When humanity was first granted limited access to interstellar space, the Concord expected decades of hesitation. Instead, humans spread narratives before they spread fleets. Stories of survival, sacrifice, and stubborn endurance leaked into alien networks. Most dismissed them as cultural noise. A few archivists noticed a pattern. Humans documented failure obsessively, then built doctrines around it. They did not hide their losses, they studied them. The first joint war simulation was meant to be ceremonial, a demonstration of Concord superiority designed to discourage independent militarization. Human delegates listened politely as scenarios were explained. When asked if they wished to review the parameters, the human representative declined, not out of arrogance but curiosity. They wanted to see how badly they would lose. The simulation began with standard assumptions. Humans would protect population centers, conserve assets, and retreat when losses exceeded acceptable thresholds. They did none of those things. Instead, human units deliberately overextended, baiting superior forces into unfavorable engagements. They sacrificed entire fleets to extract data. Concord observers were disturbed, not by the losses, but by how calmly the humans accepted them. As the simulation progressed, something unexpected happened. The humans stopped reacting and started anticipating. Their strategies adapted in real time, not through faster computation, but through decentralized decision-making. Command authority fractured intentionally. Every unit was empowered to fail independently. Conquered tacticians struggled to counter an enemy that treated doctrine as disposable. By the end of the simulation, humanity had technically lost. Their remaining forces were scattered, their infrastructure in ruins. The Concord declared victory. The human delegation requested a copy of the combat logs. When asked why, the representative smiled faintly and said, "So we can do better next time." Within a single human year, Concord intelligence detected unauthorized simulations running across human space. Millions of them. Each replayed the defeat with slight variations. Humans argued, revised, and optimized. Failure was no longer an outcome, it was raw material. Entire generations trained on losing scenarios until defeat felt familiar and survivable. When the Concord scheduled a second simulation, they expected marginal improvement. What they encountered instead was restraint. Humanity held back. They tested only a fraction of their revisions. The simulation ended in a draw. Concord analysts were unsettled. Draws were statistically improbable. Humans called it progress. Quietly, deep within Concord's strategic councils, a new file was open. Its designation was changed from anomaly to emergent threat. The file contained no weapon schematics, no fleet estimates. Just a single observation. Humans do not fear losing wars. They fear not learning from them. The third simulation was never announced publicly. It appeared inside Concord systems without ceremony, disguised as a routine recalibration exercise. Only senior strategists, archivists, and military philosophers were granted access. Humanity's arrival was equally unremarkable. No speeches, no objections, no attempt to influence the parameters. They asked only one question, spoken quietly and without emphasis. Would the opposing forces be allowed to adapt in real time? When the answer came back affirmative, the human delegation exchanged brief glances and nodded, as if a long-standing uncertainty had finally been resolved. From the opening moments, the battle unfolded in ways Concord doctrine could not explain. Human fleets did not advance in formation. They did not establish defensive lines or secure strategic choke points. Instead, they fragmented. Ships vanished into unprotected space. Supply routes were exposed deliberately. Command vessels powered down, vanishing from tactical maps. At first, Concord observers assumed malfunction or error. Then the first strikes failed, and then the second. Every decisive maneuver encountered layers of misdirection, traps nested inside vulnerabilities that should not have existed. Human strategy had shifted. They were no longer responding to events as they occurred. They were acting on events that had not yet happened. Concord commanders reported the same unsettling sensation across multiple theaters. It felt like fighting an enemy that had already watched the battle conclude. Human units withdrew seconds before annihilation, abandoning advantageous positions without hesitation, preserving not territory, but experience. Losses still occurred, but they were calculated, compartmentalized, and immediately analyzed. Midway through the simulation, Concord Artificial Intelligence Systems issued an internal alert. Probability models were destabilizing. Human behavior no longer correlated with any historical precedent. Victory conditions were being ignored entirely. Humans were not optimizing for survival or dominance. They were probing limits. Entire engagements were abandoned the moment their learning value diminished. Battles ended not when forces were destroyed, but when humans decided they had learned enough from the exchange. Then, without warning, humanity altered tactics again. Civilian-designated vessels entered contested zones, unarmed, broadcasting evacuation protocols in multiple Concord languages. Rules of engagement triggered automatically. Concord forces hesitated, recalculated, delayed. In that hesitation, human strike groups emerged from unexpected vectors, dismantling command infrastructure with surgical precision. There was no excess force, no dramatic displays of power. Systems went dark quietly. Coordination collapsed without spectacle. The humans withdrew immediately after, as if uninterested in holding what they had broken. The simulation did not end with a decisive engagement. It ended with silence. Concord command systems froze as cascading decision loops fed back into themselves. For the first time in recorded history, a Concord exercise was classified not as victory or defeat, but as inconclusive due to systemic instability. Observers waited for the human delegation to react. They did not celebrate. They did not protest. They reviewed the data in silence, marking errors, debating alternatives, identifying inefficiencies. One human analyst remarked, almost apologetically, that several responses had still been too slow. In closed council sessions that followed, Concord leadership fractured along philosophical lines. Some argued that humanity had exploited loopholes. Others insisted no rules had been broken. One archivist spoke last. He reminded the council that simulations existed for a single purpose: to predict war. And for the first time since the Concord's founding, their simulations could no longer predict the outcome of a conflict involving humans. Weeks later, a final report circulated through restricted channels. It recommended not merely a reclassification of humanity, but a revision of Concord military doctrine itself. The concluding statement was brief, unsettling, and impossible to refute. If war is a process of learning, then humanity has already been at war for centuries. Far beyond Concord borders, human academies archived the third simulation under a familiar designation. Not victory, not defeat, improvement. And somewhere in human space, planners were already preparing scenarios for a fourth exercise. Not because they expected it to come, but because history had taught them that it always would.